I'm an assistant professor at the University of Toledo in the Department of History. My name's Roberto Padilla. I lived in Japan from 1989 to 1994, where I taught English as a second language. Before that, I lived in China. I did my BA, Bachelor of Arts degree, in International Relations at San Francisco State University. After returning from Asia, I did my master's degree in history at San Francisco State, and I received my PhD in history at The Ohio State University. Japanese language was essential for the research that I do, and it also allowed me to talk with Japanese academics and researchers and librarians when I go to Japan to do research. My ability to read Japanese and read Kihanteki Bungotai, which is 19th century Japanese, has proved essential for my research. And I was fortunately able to learn that while I was a graduate student here by studying with Professor Richard Torrance. Well, personally, I never would have met my dear wife, which means that I'd probably be alone. And if I had never studied Japanese, I probably would have ended up working in a bank, because that's what I thought I was going to do as soon as I got out of my undergraduate. And that is a bleak future, to be sure. I had done a considerable amount of judo before I went to Japan, and so the ability to do judo in Japan was a lot of fun. Interacting with people was absolutely amazing, and of course the food. I love the food. What I did find a bit challenging was, and this is I would say this is a caution for anyone going to Japan, is the trying to think of a nice way to put this, but the ethnocentrism of Japanese people. They do not often understand that they're being ethnocentric, and so it becomes a challenge. I think Americans are very aware and keen of those things, but Japanese, they're not as sensitive to those issues. And so I had to learn to adjust. I had to realize that maybe people are not being mean, but they were just not as sensitive to issues of ethnicity and race as we were here. I'm not involved with the Japanese community in Ohio, only because I'm teaching at a university, and so I'm sort of enmeshed in that process. But I am involved in Japan. I have relatives, and I see them, if not once a year, every other year. When I go back to Japan, either to do research or visit family. So. Anyone going into my career field, which would be to pursue graduate studies in history, first and foremost, determine what period of history, Japanese history, you'd like to study, because that will determine what type of Japanese you need to know. If you're going to study after the end of the Second World War, the modern period, 1945 to the present, then what we would call Kokugo or Nihongo is fine. If you're going to study between 1868 to 1945, which is part of the modern period as well, you would need to study Bungotai or Kihanteki Bungotai, which is, of course, the Japanese that I use mostly. And then, of course, if you're going to study prior to 1868, the modern period, you'll have to study either classical Chinese, you'll have to either study Kanbun or Sorobun, depending on which period from the Heian period up to the end of the Tokugawa period. And so sometimes students, especially MA students, when they begin to study Japanese, they think they've studied 3 or 4 years of Japanese, they've been to Japan for a year or two, and they can speak Japanese, and they assume that they're now ready to do research, and they're not. Depending on, unless, if they're going to be doing sort of post-Second World War studies, then they're okay. So they really need to understand that the language changes based on the era.